Today we're plunging into, a really fascinating part of ancient history. We're looking at excerpts from Leviticus chapter 27.
That's right. Specifically, these very detailed laws about vows, dedications, redemption, things like that in ancient Israel.
Exactly. And our mission, really, is to unpack these rules. Not just read them, but understand the thinking behind them. You know, what they tell us about value, about ownership, what they considered sacred. Because these weren't just like abstract ideas, they were practical instructions, specific, shaped everyday life.
Yeah, very much so. And what really jumps out is how precise and systematic it all is.
Right.
It draws these clear lines. This belongs to the Lord. This can be vowed. This is how you get something back or how it's managed.
And there are these themes that keep popping up.
Definitely. Valuation is a big one.
Yeah.
And the priest's role in assessing value, it's all very methodical. The astonishing valuation of persons.
Okay, let's dive straight into maybe the most startling bit first. This idea of vowing a person to the Lord by giving an equivalent value. I mean, to our ears today, that sounds jarring. What does it even mean to put a price on a person here?
Well, it's important to understand the context. Leviticus 27, verses 3 through 7, they lay out these very specific values.
Super specific, based on age, based on gender.
Exactly. So a man, aged 20 to 60, he's valued at 50 shekels of silver.
50 shekels, okay? And a woman, same age.
30 shekels. And then it goes down for younger people, even infants.
Right, down to like 5 shekels for a baby boy, 3 for a baby girl.
Correct. But the crucial point, as you hinted, this isn't about buying or selling people. It's not slavery.
Okay, so what is it about then?
It's a system for fulfilling a vow. If someone vowed, say, themselves or maybe a family member to the Lord's service, maybe for a time, or a specific purpose, paying this set value was how they fulfilled that sacred promise.
Ah, okay, so it's a monetary equivalent for the dedicated service.
Precisely. And what's really fascinating and shows a kind of, built-in flexibility is verse 8.
What does that say?
It says, if the person making the vow was too poor to pay the standard amount, they'd present the person to the priest. And the priest would set a value based on what the vower could actually afford.
Oh, that's interesting. So it wasn't totally rigid. There was consideration for their means.
Exactly. It shows that, devotion wasn't just for the wealthy. Everyone could participate in these sacred commitments, regardless of their economic status. It's quite compassionate in a way.
That really does add another layer to it.
Yeah.
So, okay, that covers the initial vow and the valuation. But what happens next? If something's vowed, can you ever get it back? Holy and unredeemable.
Yeah.
Animals, houses, and land.
Well, that's where the rules get even more detailed. Let's talk animals first.
Okay.
If someone vowed an animal that was acceptable as an offering, like a sheep or a goat, that animal became holy instantly.
And you couldn't mess with that.
Absolutely not. Leviticus 27 is super strict. No exchanging it. No substituting good for bad or bad for good.
What if you tried?
Then both animals, the original and the substitute, became holy.
Wow. Okay. So, serious business. Don't try to swap it out.
Definitely underscores the idea that once something's given to God, that commitment is, pretty final.
But here's where it gets really interesting. There was this exception, right? For unclean animals.
Yes. Animals that weren't suitable for sacrifice. If one of those was vowed,
What then?
it had to be presented to the priest. The priest would assess it, judge its quality, good or bad, and set its value.
So still valued, but handled differently.
Exactly. And this is where redemption really becomes a key concept. For these unclean animals, and actually for houses and land too, there was a common rule if the owner wanted it back.
Let me guess. It involves paying something extra.
You got it. They had to add 1/5, that's 20% to its assessed value.
20%. That's specific.
Very. It's there for unclean animals in verse 13, for houses in verse 15, and for land in verse 19. It's like a standard redemption fee.
What if they didn't redeem the unclean animal?
Then it was just sold at the value the priest set. That's verse 27.
Okay, so that 20% is like a penalty. Or, recognition of its change status.
Yeah, maybe more the latter. It's like a sacred premium.
Yeah.
It reinforces that dedicating something was significant and reclaiming it had a real cost, both spiritually and financially. It stopped people from making vows lightly, perhaps.
Makes sense. And you said houses follow this pattern too. Dedicated, valued by the priest.
At 1/5 to get it back.
Yeah.
Same deal. Verse 14 and 15 cover houses.
Right. Okay, so animals, houses. What about land? That seems even more complex.
It is, and here they distinguish between family land, your ancestral inheritance, and land you might have bought.
How did they value family land?
Interestingly, not just by size, but by its potential productivity. The standard was based on the amount of seed needed. 50 shekels of silver for land requiring a homer of barley seed.
A homer of barley seed. So based on his agricultural output?
Pretty much. That's verse 16. It's a practical way to value something essential like land.
And then there's the year of Jubilee, that huge reset year. How did that play into dedicating land?
Crucial point. The timing of the vow mattered. If you dedicated your field during the Jubilee year, the value was set, as we just discussed.
Okay.
But if you dedicated it after the Jubilee had started, the priest calculated the value based only on the years remaining until the next Jubilee.
So the value decreased the closer you got to the next Jubilee.
Exactly. Because the land would revert in the Jubilee anyway, it reflects the temporary nature of the dedication within that larger cycle.
Right.
Verses 17 and 18.
So for family land, you could redeem it by adding the fifth, the 20%.
Yes. Verse 19. Standard rule.
But what if you didn't redeem it? Or what if, say, the person who vowed it sold that field to someone else?
That's where it gets really serious for family land. If it wasn't redeemed or if it was sold on,
Yeah.
it could never be redeemed by the original owner or family again, ever.
Never. So what happened to it?
When the Jubilee year came, it didn't revert to the original family. Instead, it became holy, like a field devoted to the Lord. It actually became the property of the priests.
Wow. That's a permanent consequence.
It really is. Verses 20 and 21. It likely emphasized the immense importance of ancestral land and the seriousness of vowing it, maybe discouraged casual vows involving something so fundamental.
So that was for family land. What about land someone had bought, not inherited?
Different rules there. The priest would value that field based on the time left until the Jubilee. The person who dedicated it paid that value.
And then?
Then, in the Jubilee year, the land went back, not to the person who vowed it, but to the original family or person from whom it was bought in the first place.
So it always returned to the original hereditary owner eventually.
Exactly. Verses 22 to 24. The whole system, you see, is deeply tied to maintaining those tribal and family land inheritances over generations. The Jubilee was the key mechanism.
It's incredibly intricate. And just to tie it all together, there's this mention of the currency, right?
Yes, consistently.
Yeah.
Verse 25 specifies all these valuations are according to the sanctuary shekel.
Which was 20 gerahs.
20 gerahs. A standard, recognized weight, ensuring fairness and consistency across all these sacred transactions. The unwavering, most holy. Devoted things and tithes.
Okay, so we've talked about things that could be vowed and often redeemed with that 20% premium. But there's another category, wasn't there? Things that were unredeemable.
Yes, a very significant category. These were things devoted. The Hebrew word is cherem.
Cherem, okay.
Leviticus 27.28 says that anything a person owned and devoted entirely to the Lord, whether it was a person, an animal, or family land, could not be sold or redeemed, period.
That's completely set apart.
Utterly. Described as most holy to the Lord. This implies a level of consecration that's just irreversible. It raises that question, what makes something so sacred it can't be bought back?
It's a stark contrast to the redeemable items.
Yeah.
And the text gets even more intense, right? Verse 29.
Yes. That's probably the most severe line in the chapter. No person devoted to destruction may be ransomed. They are to be put to death.
Devoted to destruction. What does that mean in this context?
It generally refers to a total, absolute consecration or dedication to God, often in situations involving divine judgment or warfare, where certain people or things were commanded to be completely removed or destroyed, set apart entirely for God's purposes with no possibility of recovery or normal use.
So an extreme, irreversible status.
Exactly. It shows there was a whole spectrum of dedication from vows you could redeem, albeit with a cost, right up to this total, irrevocable devotion.
Okay. Now, shifting gears slightly, but still on the theme of what belongs to the Lord.
Tithe.
Right. Another category of things inherently considered holy, belonging to God.
Verse 30 says the tithe, a tenth of everything from the land, grain, fruit. It belongs to the Lord. It's holy.
Yes. And interestingly, even though it inherently belonged to God, there was still a provision for redemption.
Let me guess. Add a fifth.
You're catching on. Verse 31. If someone wanted to redeem their tithe, perhaps use the produce themselves, they had to add 20% to its value. That consistent fee again.
It really is a running theme. It is. And the tithe also applied to animals. Verse 32 talks about the herd or flock, every 10th animal that passed under the shepherd's counting rod.
That 10th one was holy to the Lord.
Correct.
And similar rules applied here too, right? About substitution.
Exactly like with the vowed animals we discussed earlier. Verse 33 is clear. You couldn't examine them to pick out the good from the bad, and you couldn't make a substitution.
And if you did substitute,
Then both the original 10th animal and the substitute became holy, and, importantly, neither could be redeemed.
wow. So trying to gain the tithe just increased the holiness, made it unredeemable.
It seems so. It really hammers home the seriousness of these obligations. And the chapter concludes, verse 34, by stating, "These are the commands the Lord gave Moses at Mount Sinai for the Israelites."
A comprehensive system laid out right there. Outro.
It really frames it as foundational law.
So, stepping back from all these details, what's the big picture here? What does this ancient system tell us? Maybe thinking about our own lives, our own values.
Well, I think what's striking is just how incredibly structured it was.
Yeah.
This wasn't vague piety. It was a detailed framework for defining holiness, ownership, and how humans interacted with the divine realm through, well, tangible things.
Yeah, valuation, dedication, redemption. These were concrete actions.
Absolutely. And the sheer scope. It covers people, animals, houses, land, produce. It suggests a worldview where almost anything could have a sacred dimension, could be considered the Lord's.
It must have profoundly shaped how they saw, well, everything they owned and their obligations.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And that precise accounting, that consistent 20% fee, it's not just bookkeeping. It reveals this highly organized approach to managing the sacred. It shows that reclaiming something dedicated always had a clear, tangible cost.
A reminder that value isn't always just market price.
Exactly. There's a sacred value, a cost associated with commitment and
Right.
its reversal.
It really makes you pause, doesn't it? When you think about these ancient laws, the precise values, the rules for giving things up, for getting them back, it kind of forces you to look at our modern ideas. You know, what do we truly value? What do we consider sacred or maybe devoted in our lives today? What are we willing to fully dedicate? And is there anything we would consider unredeemable?
That's a powerful question to leave people with. What lines do we draw?